History teachers love to keep things serious. Wars, treaties, plagues, and the rise and fall of empires. All very important stuff. But somewhere along the way, they decide to skip over the parts where a philosopher laughed himself to death watching a drunk donkey, or where an entire city built obscene snowmen just to mock the government. These are the moments that got edited out of the curriculum because, honestly, how do you put 60 nobles drowned in a medieval toilet on a test? I'm Michael25, and these are 25 facts that are too funny to be in history books. 25. Ohio's two-car pileup. Back in 1895, the state of Ohio was so new to the whole automobile thing that there were reportedly only 2 cars in the entire state. 2. And somehow, against all statistical probability, these 2 cars managed to find each other and crash. The story has been passed around for over a century now, and while historians can't confirm every detail, the tale survives because it perfectly captures the chaos of early driving. There were no traffic laws, no signals, and definitely no driver's licenses. Roads were shared with horses, wagons, and pedestrians who had no idea what a car even was. Whether or not it happened exactly as described, the fact that it's believable says everything about how experimental those early days on the road really were. 24. Benjamin Franklin's Boredom Project. Benjamin Franklin is remembered as one of history's greatest thinkers. Inventor, diplomat, and founding father, the man had a resume that could stretch across the Atlantic. But what most people don't know is that he also enjoyed causing international incidents for fun. While serving as an ambassador in England during the late 1700s, Franklin became bored and decided to stir things up. He wrote a fake letter to a major London newspaper claiming that England was being forced to accept deported Prussian prisoners. The letter sparked outrage on both sides, with British citizens demanding that the practice stop and Prussian officials taking deep offense at the backlash. Tensions escalated so quickly that the 2 countries nearly went to war over it. Years later, the truth came out. Franklin had made the whole thing up just to see what would happen. Founding father behavior, honestly. 23. The mooning that started a riot. The earliest recorded mooning happened way back in year 66, and it did not end well. During Passover, as crowds of Jewish pilgrims traveled to Jerusalem, a Roman soldier stationed nearby decided to express his feelings about the whole situation by exposing himself to the crowd. The gesture was meant as mockery, but the pilgrims were not amused. Stones started flying, shouting erupted, and Roman forces moved in to restore order. Their crackdown only made things worse. The chaos that followed resulted in a stampede that cost thousands of lives. What started as one soldier's crude joke became a deadly flashpoint in history. It's the kind of story that belongs in textbooks, but somehow never makes the cut. 22. The siege where enemies shared bullets. In 1821, Greek fighters were laying siege to a Turkish garrison station on the Acropolis in Athens. As the standoff dragged on, the defenders ran dangerously low on ammunition. Desperate to keep fighting, they started dismantling parts of the ancient marble columns to melt down the iron and lead clamps for bullets. When the Greeks realized what was happening, they made a decision that sounds completely made up. They sent ammunition to their enemies with a message urging them to stop destroying the monument. The preservation of the Parthenon mattered more than the battle itself. It remains one of the strangest acts of cultural protection during wartime, and proof that even in conflict, some things are just too important to lose. 21. Liechtenstein's bonus soldier. Liechtenstein's last military engagement is remembered more for its charm than its combat. In 1866, during the Austro-Prussian War, the tiny country sent 80 soldiers to guard a mountain pass on the Italian border. No fighting ever reached them. Not a single shot was fired. When the deployment ended, the unit marched home safely. Except, they returned with 81 people instead of 80. Somewhere along the way, the soldiers had befriended an Italian man who decided to tag along and move to Liechtenstein. The country officially recorded 0 casualties and 1 unexpected bonus friend. It's arguably the most wholesome military outcome in recorded history, and further proof that sometimes the best way to win a war is to make friends instead. 20. The Bastille's disappointing rescue. When revolutionaries stormed the Bastille on July 14, 1789, they expected to liberate a fortress overflowing with political prisoners and strike a devastating blow against tyranny. What they actually found was a bit of a letdown. The entire prison held just 7 people. 4 were forgers, 2 were there for mental health reasons, the last one was an aristocrat whose own family had asked to have him locked away. Not a single political prisoner among them. One of the inmates, an eccentric Irishman named White de Melville, seemed genuinely baffled by all the commotion and had no clue that a revolution was unfolding around him. Still, despite the anticlimactic rescue, the fall of the Bastille went on to become one of the most powerful symbols in modern history. 19. Flaming monkeys as naval weapons. During the Opium Wars in the mid-1800s, Chinese defenders were desperate to repel the technologically superior British naval forces. According to some accounts, they turned to unconventional tactics. One story claims that cages of monkeys were set on fire and launched towards British ships with the hope that the panicked animals would leap aboard, spread flames, and cause chaos on deck. Whether or not the monkey bombs were shared as widely as the stories suggest is still debated by historians. British records do mention fire rafts and incendiary devices during the conflict. Regardless of the exact details, the episode reflects just how desperate and creative warfare can get when one side is severely outmatched. 18. The time Christianity had 3 popes. The 14th century gave us one of the most absurd episodes in religious history. Cardinals gathered in Rome to elect a new pope, but an angry mob outside made it clear that violence would follow if the choice wasn't Italian. Under pressure, an Italian pope was elected. The cardinals then fled to France, declared the whole thing invalid, and elected a French pope instead. Suddenly, Christianity had 2 popes, each branding the other a fraud. Europe split into rival camps, and things got messy fast. The church's solution was to elect a 3rd pope, hoping that he would sort everything out. The new Greek pope did not. Now, there were 3 popes, all declaring the others illegitimate. Eventually, the whole mess was scrapped, everyone was deposed, and a single pope was elected again. This time, they made sure no angry mobs were nearby. 17. Prague's window-throwing tradition. Prague has a very specific way of handling political disagreements. They throw people out of windows. The city experienced not 1, but 2 historically significant defenestrations, which is literally the act of hurling someone from a window. The second one, in 1618, involved 2 Catholic officials being tossed from a 70-foot-high window of Prague Castle by Protestant rebels. Remarkably, both men survived. How they survived depends on who you ask. Catholics claim the Virgin Mary caught them mid-fall. Protestants insisted they simply landed in a pile of manure. Either way, the incident triggered the 30 Years' War, one of the deadliest conflicts in European history. All because someone decided a window was the best way to make a point. 16. The spy who fooled everyone. During World War II, a Spanish man named Juan Pujol Garcia pulled off one of the war's greatest deceptions. Disgusted by fascism, as he should be, he offered to spy for the British and Americans. Both turned him down. Undeterred, Juan went ahead on his own. He posed as a Nazi-loyal Spanish official and convinced Germany to make him an agent. Assigned to spy on London, he instead parked himself in Lisbon and fed the Nazis phony intelligence he crafted from newspapers. The British eventually noticed that his fake reports were tying up German resources and officially recruited him. One ran a completely fictitious spy network financed entirely by the Nazis and helped divert troops during the D-Day invasion. By the end of the war, he had received medals from both the Nazis and the British. Neither side realized they were honoring the same man. 15. Straw planes and divine cargo. After World War II, something strange started happening on remote Pacific islands. During the war, the US military had set up bases there, and local tribes got their first glimpse of modern technology. Planes landed with food, medicine, and supplies unlike anything they had ever seen. To the islanders, it must have looked like magic falling from the sky. When the war ended and the soldiers packed up and left, the supplies stopped coming. But the memory of those gifts didn't fade. Some communities wanted so badly for the planes to return that they started building their own versions out of straw and wood. They cleared fake runways in the jungle, marched in formation like the soldiers had, and waited for the sky to deliver again. It never did, of course. But these cargo cults, as they came to be called, tell us something fascinating about how people make sense of things they can't explain. And the answer isn't obvious. Humans have always been pretty good at inventing one. 14. The surgery with a 300% mortality rate. In 1847, Scottish surgeon Robert Liechtenstein became infamous for his speed in the operating room. Surgery before anesthesia was brutal, and speed meant survival. Liechtenstein can amputate a leg in under 30 seconds. During one particular operation, he completed the amputation in just 25 seconds. The problem was that he also accidentally amputated his assistant's fingers in the process. Both the patient and assistant later died of infections. To make matters worse, a spectator in the room reportedly passed away from shock just from watching. The incident is remembered as the only surgery in history with a 300% fatality rate. 3 people gone from one procedure. It's a grim reminder of how dangerous medicine used to be. 13. The pirate who just wanted hats. Benjamin Hornigold was one of the most feared pirate hunters of the early 1700s. He spent his career hunting down criminals on the high seas. But one raid had nothing to do with treasure or cargo. After a night of heavy drinking, Hornigold's crew realized they had lost all their hats during the party. Rather than wait to replace them, Hornigold decided to board a passing ship and take the hats from its crew. That was it. No gold, no jewels, just headwear. The operation was a success, and the men sailed away with their new hats. So, even the most dangerous figures in history sometimes just wanted to look good. 12. Beethoven's musical beatdown. In the early 1800s, celebrated pianist Daniel Steibelt made the mistake of challenging Beethoven to a musical improvisation duel in Vienna. Steibelt was already famous for composing for Marie Antoinette, so he arrived confident, even bringing his own sheet music. When it was Beethoven's turn, he grabbed Steibelt's composition, flipped it upside down, and performed the piece backwards. The audience was stunned. Steibelt was humiliated so badly that he never returned to Vienna again. Beethoven's dominance in improvisation was cemented that night, and no one dared challenge him after that. The best way to win a competition is to make your opponent regret showing up. 11. The Pharaoh's personal enema specialist. Alright, look, I do not know how to break this to you gently, so I'm just going to come out and say it. Ancient Egypt had a guy whose entire job was taking care of the pharaoh's backside. His official title was the Shepherd of the Anus, and I am not making that up. There was also a position called the Keeper of the Royal Rectum, which is exactly what it sounds like. This person was responsible for administering enemas to the most powerful ruler in the land, and honestly, it was considered an honor. These weren't low-ranking servants. They held respected positions in the royal court. The Egyptians believed that the god Thoth invented the enema, so the whole practice carried religious weight. Taking care of your bowels wasn't just about health, it was sacred. Medical texts from as far back as 1550 BCE include instructions for the procedure, which means people were writing about this stuff before most civilizations had figured out the alphabet. 10. The philosopher who laughed himself to death. The Stoic philosopher Chrysippus was known for his rigorous logic and emotional restraint. He spent his life mastering reason and self-control. And then he passed away laughing at a drunk donkey. According to ancient accounts, Chrysippus became so amused watching a donkey try to eat figs after being given wine that he couldn't stop laughing. The hilarity proved fatal. The irony is almost too perfect. A man who dedicated his life to suppressing emotional responses met his end because he couldn't handle how funny a donkey looked. 9. The Ceasefire for Swans. During the 1916 Easter Rising, Irish rebels fought to end British rule in one of the bloodiest uprisings of the era. But at St. Stephen's Green in Dublin, a peculiar moment of civility emerged amid the chaos. An hour-long ceasefire was observed each day so that the park's keeper could feed the swans. Bullets paused, soldiers waited, the swans got their meal. The ceasefire didn't protect the man's property, though. While he was tending to the birds, both rebels and soldiers managed to destroy his house. Still, the story stands as a darkly funny reminder that even in the middle of a revolution, some routines simply must continue. 8. The Astronomer with the Wildest Life. Danish astronomer Tycho Brahe was brilliant, eccentric, and absolutely unhinged. He lost part of his nose in a duel with another scientist over whose mathematical formula was better. For the rest of his life, he wore a metal prosthesis to cover the damage. His personal life was equally chaotic. He kept a pet moose that reportedly drank too much beer at a party and fell down a flight of stairs. The moose did not survive. Brahe himself met an equally bizarre end at a banquet in 1601. He refused to leave the table to relieve himself, and his bladder eventually failed. He passed away 10 days later. Genius and absurdity rarely come packaged so neatly together. 7. The shrine where laughter is the point. At the Hiraoka Shrine in Higashi Osaka, Japan, there's a centuries-old tradition called Owarai Shinji. Participants gather and laugh continuously, believing that joy itself can attract good fortune and prosperity. It's not polite chuckling either. People laugh loudly, intentionally, and for as long as they can manage. The ritual blends spirituality with humor in a way that most religious traditions don't. Thousands attend each year just to participate in what might be the world's most wholesome festival. In a world full of solemn ceremonies, there's something refreshing about a tradition that treats laughter as a virtue with mystical benefits. 6. The Parisian Tax on Urine. In 17th century Paris, urine was valuable enough to be taxed. The city government realized that ammonia from collected urine was useful for producing saltpeter, a key ingredient in gunpowder. Tanners and dyers wanted it too, since it worked wonders on leather and fabrics. So, French authorities created the system where urine could be sold to authorized factories, and chamber pots were inspected for payment. Refusing to participate could result in fines. Yeah, you heard me right. The government was fining people for not handing over their pee. And somewhere, in the middle of all this, a brand new job was born. Somebody had to go around collecting the stuff, which meant that piss collector was an actual profession in early modern France. I'm sure the career counselors of the era had a field day with that one. 5. The king who thought he was glass. King Charles VI of France was convinced he was made of glass. Not metaphorically, the man genuinely believed that if someone bumped into him too hard, he would shatter into 1,000 pieces. His attendants took the whole thing seriously enough that they padded his furniture and wrapped him in protective clothing to keep him from cracking. And Charles wasn't the only person walking around Europe worried about spontaneously breaking. Doctors at the time treated this as a real condition, and cases popped up across the continent for a couple hundred years. Nobody knows exactly why so many people became terrified of their own fragility, but it happened often enough that it got its own name. Between the plague and the printing press, a surprising number of Europeans convinced themselves that they were one wrong move away from shattering. The human mind is a fascinating and deeply weird place. 4. The riot that started over a fish. Staying in the general neighborhood, let's head to Spain for this next one. The Mutiny of the Trout was a bizarre uprising in 12th century Zamora that reportedly began over a single fish. A town official tried to seize a prized trout that a fishmonger had already promised to a shoemaker. The argument spiraled out of control almost immediately. Locals rallied behind the shoemaker, the official was arrested, and chaos erupted. Knights locked themselves in a church, which rioters then set on fire. The rebels razed the governor's house and fled to the Portuguese border, threatening to abandon the city entirely if their demands weren't met. What started as a disagreement over dinner became a full-blown political crisis, all because someone really wanted that fish. 3. The world's messiest festival started by accident. La Tomatina, the world's biggest food fight, began with a simple street scuffle in Buñol, Spain. During a local festival in the 40s, a vegetable stand got knocked over, and revelers started throwing tomatoes at each other. It wasn't organized, it wasn't planned, it was just chaos. Residents loved it so much that they did it again the next year, and the next. Eventually, it became an official event where thousands converged annually to hurl ripe tomatoes until the streets run red. The festival was actually banned at one point, which only made people want it more. Locals staged a mock funeral for a tomato in a coffin to mourn its loss. Shortly after, La Tomatina was reinstated. 2. The floor that dropped nobles into a toilet. On July 25, 1184, a grand assembly in Erfurt, Germany became the site of one of history's most absurd tragedies. Dozens of nobles gathered on the second floor of a building when the floor suddenly gave way. They didn't fall into a courtyard or a cellar. They fell straight into the cesspit below. Around 60 of them plunged into the latrine and drowned in what can only be described as the worst possible way to go. The incident, known as the Erfurter Latrinensturz, became folklore almost immediately. It's the kind of story that sounds too ridiculous to be true, but historians have documented it thoroughly. Sometimes history really is stranger than anything fiction could come up with. 1. Brussels' Obscene Snowman Festival. In 1511, Brussels got hit with one of the coldest winters on record. So, what did the locals do? They built snowmen. About 110 of them. Oh, and they made them absolutely filthy. I'm not talking cute scarves and top hats here. These snow sculptures depicted people in compromising positions, figures peeing into fountains, and scenes that would make your grandmother clutch her pearls. There was even a snow dentist, which honestly might be the most disturbing one of them all. But here's the thing. These weren't just crude jokes. The people of Brussels were ticked off at the ruling class, and the snowmen were their way of saying so. Rich and poor citizens both got in on the action, building their own creations and, at times, even destroying each other's out of spite. The whole city turned into a frozen, chaotic art gallery of political commentary and bathroom humor. Then, the weather warmed and the snow melted. The so-called miracle of 1511 disappeared, but the story stuck around. Over 500 years later, we're still talking about the time an entire city decided to protest with raunchy snowmen. And there you have it. 25 moments from history that were apparently too ridiculous for the classroom. From drunk donkeys and flaming monkeys, to popes fighting popes and nobles falling into toilets, the past was way funnier than anyone gave it credit for. What's your favorite funny moment in history? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this trip through history's greatest hits, click here to check out 25 Secrets the History Books Left Out. It dives into even more forgotten stories that never made the cut. And that's it for today. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, click that notification bell so you never miss out on any content, and I'll see you in the next one.